Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 423. I am so excited for today's guest. We have back on the show Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, Glenn was in episode 56, 249, and 231. So it's been a while since you've been on the show, although it just feels like yesterday. It's amazing. Time, although linear, doesn't feel linear, does it, Glenn?
Goes by so quickly, and I think the last time I was on this show, I had all my hair and teeth.
And you still do?
I still do, yeah.
Okay, good.
It was back in the days when I had all my hair and teeth. Time goes really quickly.
Yes, it does. Well, and when we had you on the show last, episode 231, you had just published your second book. Now, listeners can get a free copy of your book, Never Binge Again, by going to truehealtheating.com. That's truehealtheating.com. Your book's fantastic. One of our listeners, I should have pulled up the actual quote in our Facebook group. We have a Learn True Health Facebook group. And one of our listeners, after listening to episodes with you, said, "Tonight is the first night I ate dinner without anxiety." She was like, "No, this is no kidding. I have never felt at peace while eating. This is my first experience feeling at peace while eating." And she was like, I mean, she made me cry. She was so grateful for the information. And some people don't even know, like, their constant anxiety around food and just the constant pressure and stress around food and all the emotions wrapped up around food. That's their norm. And when they go through your literature, your workshop, all your information, your free book, they gain a sense of peace with food.
Does my heart good. Really does my heart good. Yeah, there's misinformation in the culture about how to develop a peaceful relationship with food. Most people think we're supposed to use guidelines like, I avoid chocolate 90% of the time. And it's a good guideline. It's a good idea in theory. It's like a good North Star to shoot for. But the problem with it is that every time you're in front of a chocolate bar, there's this little voice inside you that says, is this part of the 10% or is this part of the 90%? Am I being good or am I being bad? And it's almost like having a little kid and they see a candy bar in your hand and they, mommy, can I, how about now? Because they know that sometimes they can. Whereas if you use a hard and fast rule and you said, I'll only ever have chocolate on the last 3 days of the calendar month, you'd still be avoiding chocolate 90% of the time, but your decisions would have been made for you, and there'd be no reason for that little kid to keep asking all month long until the 27th. And so you'd have a newfound peace with food, having made really hard and fast decisions about what role the chocolate was going to play in your life. And you wouldn't be constantly struggling with all these thoughts and maybe I should and maybe I shouldn't, which is what ruins people's relationship with food. So I think that information is just not out there. And when people adopt it and they create a very clear rule and they declare themselves confident, they actually become confident and that voice shuts up eventually.
To be able to have that peace where the voice isn't all the time there. I mean, some people have had that for so long they don't even believe that's possible. And so you're saying that going through the work, they can get to a place where that voice doesn't control them anymore.
I mean, I suffered for 30 years. My life was about, when am I going to get to the deli? When can I get to the pizza place? How much chocolate will I have? How will I stop? How will I make up for it? How will I hide the evidence? How much weight am I going to gain? Will anybody notice? Will I be able to see patients while I'm all charged up on chocolate? That was my life. I'd be sitting with a suicidal patient and I'll be thinking, I want a chocolate Pop-Tart. And thankfully I never lost anybody. I was really dedicated, but really I was not 100% present because I was very drained and distracted by these constant thoughts about food. And once I discovered that there was a way to find peace, which it didn't require me to solve all my emotional problems. Um, so yeah, I was going through chocolate because I was lonely and depressed, and I was in a bad marriage, and I didn't really have a lot of satisfaction in my life, and that was all true. But it didn't have to solve all that to stop binging on chocolate. I just had to be really clear about the rules, be clear about what that underlying voice of justification was that said, you worked out hard enough so you can have chocolate even though it's not the last calendar 3 days of the month. Or chocolate comes from a cocoa bean, which is a plant, and therefore it's a vegetable, or whatever that voice was saying. Once I learned that I could hear that and ignore it or logically refute it, then I found peace without. I mean, I'm still. I wish I had love in my life. I wish I was coupled at this point. I still struggle with some of those things. I still have loneliness and brokenhearted moments and everything like that, but I don't have to binge anymore.
You don't have to go to food to medicate it, to numb the pain of feeling lonely.
Yes, that's true. And I think that the self-medication paradigm is only half the story. And I think that in and of itself, it fuels overeating. The actual paradigm that I'm eating for comfort, I'm eating to numb myself out because I'm unhappy and uncomfortable with my life. And it's the only thing I've learned how to self-soothe. When people tell me that, for example, they're eating too much chocolate to numb out, I'll say that's really interesting. Have you ever been to the dentist to fill a cavity? And they all say, yeah, because most people have had a cavity. And I say, well, did the dentist say to you, I'm out of Novocaine. I think I'm going to inject you with some chocolate instead. Is that okay? and the point of that is that chocolate is not really something that has a numbing effect, right? Donuts, the dentist is not going to inject you with donuts either, or bagels, or potato chips, or any of the other things that people supposedly turn to for comfort. The point I'm trying to make is that there's another impact of the artificially concentrated sources of pleasure we call comfort, and that impact is a food high. You're having chocolate because it's a concentration of theobromine and caffeine and sugar and fat and vanilla and all sorts of other good tasting neurological stimulants that give you the feeling like you're in love and really change your perception of the world like a drug. And it's perfectly legal. And
Mm.
I'll fight for your right to do it if you want to do it. I'm not saying we have to eliminate chocolate, but it is a drug, and part of the reason that we're having it is to get high with food. We're not just numbing out; we're getting high with food, and that is a paradigm people need to shift to if they really want to
Mm.
stop overeating. Because if you think you're just eating for comfort or to numb yourself out, you're going to want to be empathetic to that lizard brain voice inside of you. So when it says eat, 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 you're going to go, here you go, poor baby. Poor baby, you need a hug, right? But the problem with that, there are two problems with it. First of all, the part of the brain that responds to food addiction, which is the same part of the brain that's responsible for the feast and famine response, for the fight or flight response. It's a very primitive reptilian part of the brain. When it evolved, it didn't really know love. Like here we are thinking that food addiction has everything to do with not being loved enough, not offering yourself enough self-love. But the lizard brain doesn't really know love. It looks at something in the environment and it says, what am I supposed to do with that thing? Do I eat it? Do I mate with it, or do I kill it? That's the level, that's the primitive level at which the lizard brain operates. And we're all here trying to love it out of its impulse. When I think what we should, right? So I think what we should be doing is dominating it instead. It's like it's like your bladder. Your bladder forces for expression. If it says you really got to pee, you got to pee right now. You say well, wait a minute, I'm in charge. I'm in a meeting now. I'll definitely take care of you later, but I'm going to do it in a particular way at a particular time of my choosing. And I'm very comfortable with that impulse. I'm not at all frightened of it. I know that I'll give myself a bathroom break in an hour and a half or so if I need it, or sooner if I have to. And as a civilized human being, I go about my day. I don't, compulsively pee in the street or in the middle of a meeting. But people are very mixed up about how you're supposed to handle the impulse to overeat, and they don't think of it as a pure biological impulse that they've developed a very bad habit around. They think of it as the manifestation of an emotional conflict. They think of it as associated with, all these loving memories with their mother or their grandparents or their dad. And, as a result, you could spend 30 years in psychotherapy trying to work through all your innermost conflicts. And you might get a lot of benefit out of working through your innermost conflicts in psychotherapy. But like me, if you're like me, I did that. I became a very soulful person. I think it's a big part of who I am, but it didn't stop me from overeating. I binged my way through 30 years of psychotherapy. So
Mm.
that's why I think we need to shift paradigms from self-medication to getting high with food, and from the love yourself thin paradigm to the alpha wolf paradigm, which says, look, this thing in my brain, this primitive part of my brain, my feast or famine response, it's challenging me for leadership in the same way that a lower member of a wolf pack might challenge the alpha wolf. And when the alpha wolf is challenged in a wolf pack, challenged for leadership, it doesn't say, oh my goodness, someone needs a hug. Come here, you poor baby. Let me take care of you. Let me feed you. The alpha wolf growls and snarls and says, get back in line or I'll kill you. Right? And my big discovery was that I had to break out of this love myself thin paradigm and into this alpha wolf paradigm where I just refuse to let my lizard brain take control.
So this part of the brain that is responsible for mating, killing, and eating for survival, because that's all we have to do to make sure that we can pass on our genetic code to the next generation, is eat to stay alive and mate to reproduce and then kill to survive and eat. Um, what why does that part of the brain want to overeat, and why doesn't everyone overeat?
Well, most people do overeat at times beyond their best judgment. There are other people who choose other vices. People do too much marijuana, or they get involved in, um, you know, negative sexual relationships, or they get involved with gambling, or some other type of impulsive vice. So most people struggle with the lizard brain's expression in some way. What was the first part of the question again? Why doesn't everyone overeat? Ask me the question again. I'm sorry.
So that part of the brain that's responsible for us to mate, eat, and kill, that very basic instinctive level, why does it want to binge?
Well, there's several reasons. It's a really good question. Part of it, uh, they all involve the idea that a biological error has been made, that the reptilian brain has been made to think and made to really believe that the binge food is like oxygen. It's required for survival. If you think about where we evolved in the tropics, kind of depends upon your theory of the world. I believe I've done a lot of reading on nutrition and the human diet, and I really believe that um, we were evolved to eat mostly fruit, leafy greens, and an occasional handful of nuts or seeds. That's what I think we really evolved to. Some people would add, wild game in there, but okay. It's very rare that you see people binging on fruit and leafy green vegetables. Whole fresh, ripe raw fruits and leafy green vegetables. Very few people binge on that. Most people binge on industrially concentrated foods. And so, a bag of potato chips or pizza or pasta or some concentrated form of starch or sugar or fat or salt or excitotoxins that wouldn't be found in nature is triggering the part of the brain that says, this is where you can find an ultra dense source of calories and nutrition, even though the nutrition isn't really there. And so the brain makes a biological error and it says, well, why would I continue going after fruits and vegetables when there's so many more calories available for so much less effort in such a much smaller space over here? And then these things are made to be, convenient, and they're packaged up to look like they're nutritious. One of my classic stories is working with the VP of marketing for a major food bar manufacturer, who told me that their most profitable insight was to take the vitamins out of the bar and put the money into making the packaging look very diverse and colorful instead. Because in nature, a shiny diversity of colors would indicate a diversity of nutrition that was available. So think of a salad with purple cabbage and yellow carrots and deep green arugula or spinach or romaine lettuce or something like that, and blueberries and cherries or whatever you want to put in that salad. That's a signal. Those colors are a signal for a diversity of nutrients that are available. And what this guy was telling me was that they actually figured out a way to trigger the part of the brain that responds to that diversity of nutrients, but they did it with less nutrients. and that happens all over the place. And so the brain finds the calories, right? It finds the calories, and so it says there's got to be something there, and then it can't. It says, well, wait a minute, there's not enough nutrition, and it creates this kind of pleasurable but empty experience. That's why I say people are looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container. You can't ever really find satisfaction there, but you can find craving that creates more craving that creates more craving. It's what drug addicts would call chasing the dragon. You can't really get to the satiation level, and so you just keep craving more and more and more. And there's this, loop of confusion. And what tends to happen is because the brain has made this biological error and is now going after the wrong stimulus, it's not actually getting the nutrition that it needs, which sets up more craving. And since the brain has now learned that it's supposed to go after this alternate source for craving, it starts to downregulate its interest in fruits and vegetables where the real nutrition is. And most people who are struggling with obesity or overeating will say they don't really love fruits and vegetables. They know you have to eat more fruit and vegetables to really lose weight, but they don't love them. And it's just a downward cycle. And then the advertising is really strong to support that notion. And then the addiction treatment industry says that you can't quit even if you want to. The best you could do is abstain one day at a time, which is not true. People can change their addictive patterns if they want to. It's nothing more than a very, very, very bad habit that's in a very, very, very well-worn groove. And the experience of addiction is the experience of powerlessness. You really believe that you don't have a choice, but you do have a choice. So, yeah. So that's what's going on in our world today. And I'll give you a very practical solution. You probably find that after you eat your binge food, that you're constantly thinking about the next time you're going to have the binge food, and your craving shifts more towards that food. And if you want to retrain your biology to crave what it's supposed to crave, if you force yourself to have, assuming there's no medical reason that you can't have this, and there are some people who can't have greens, but if you throw a half pound of leafy green vegetables, I like romaine lettuce or sometimes some kale juice, you throw that in the blender with some water and you drink it down like it was a vitamin, just like medicine, you'll find that suddenly you're craving the binge food less. And I think the reason for that is you're showing your survival drive that genuine nutrition is actually available, and you're showing where it's available, and it stops the obsession. It's another way that you find more peace with food. So, but part of the philosophy is to intervene and make rules for yourself that would dictate healthy behavior and eliminate decision making, like we talked about before. But the other half of this is to figure out what is the biological error that my brain has been making, and what does my body authentically need instead. That's why I always say that, I got off of chocolate not just by saying I'll never have chocolate again. I started out with 90% of the time, but I eventually evolved to never having it again. But I didn't really do it just by saying I'll never have chocolate again. I also did it by running to a banana kale smoothie whenever I had the chocolate craving.
Mm. Choosing the food that, even people say, oh, I hate vegetables or I don't like vegetables or whatever. You take it like a medicine, suck it up, and throw it in a blender and drink it fast or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, absolutely.
telling
Yeah.
it's telling the brain, here's where the good nutrition is, and then you start getting less and less cravings, and sometimes people start noticing that they're craving kale, they're craving greens, they're craving oranges and tomatoes, and they just start craving plants, because that's where the majority of our minerals and pretty much all of our vitamins are going to come from. By eating whole plants, we could retrain our brain that that's where the nutrition is going to come from. And of course, they have created frankenfoods that hijack the brain, because salt, sugar, and fat all trigger the brain to want more of it.
Yeah.
So they figured out how to hijack it. I interviewed a woman, I might have mentioned this before in a previous interview with you, but I interviewed a woman who called herself a food sommelier, and because she was actually a chemist who for many years worked in the food industry, something like for Doritos, one of those companies. And her job was, there's this new flavor of, and I'm just going to say Doritos because it's one of these brands that's like Pringles or something. Like everyone knows this brand, Cheetos, whatever it was. And her team were responsible for creating new flavors. And so they did experiments, and they were very excited about this. And I kind of asked, like, was there at any point like an evil, like maniacal, overlord come down from the CEO office who clearly had a pact with Satan, and he, like, there's some evil about these companies, they really want to hurt people. And was there ever a time where you felt like there's this evil, like, agenda? And she said no, like the scientists geek out on how can we make this food craveable? How can we make this food addictive? How can we make this food trigger the brain even more, hype up the excitement centers of the brain even more? Like, how can we make this food be edible crack? And they didn't, they weren't looking at the efficacy at all. They were encouraged, and they were rewarded for making something fun, like kind of like they felt like they were making a an amusement park for the mouth. Like,
Yeah.
this is innocent, and it's very compartmentalized. So these scientists worked together, and they got so excited when they could figure out that the certain, chemical makeup, this new chemical makeup, new flavor, new type of oil mixed with some kind of, hybridized salt and sugar, could trigger us in an even more addictive way. And then the food company gets so excited because they're making lots of money, and people are, wanting to eat more and more of it. And then the scientists, they feel like they've done their job. So she eventually left that company, kind of coming to her wits, coming back to reality, realizing that she was a part of a system that was definitely creating harm in the world, when she looked around and realized that 1 in 3 people are obese or have diabetes, and we're going down the wrong path. And she started getting into whole foods and started getting into plants, and but she saw that you could then take the same principles as they did in the lab and apply it to eating healthy food. How can I make this kale be so delicious and so healthy? How can I? And so there's we can do that. But we have to understand that these packaged foods are delicious for a reason. They have scientists who like study our brains and figure out how to make us
They
be
do.
addicted to it. So it's kind of like the cigarette industry and the alcohol industry. I just feel like maybe 100 or 500 years from now, eventually they will have the same restrictions, the same warning on packaged food as they do on cigarettes. Like it's
Yeah.
already happened in California, but like people are gonna get it. We're gonna wake up one day. People have to wake up one day and see that these packaged foods are harming them. And they're trying to hijack that part of our brain that wants to overeat. Now, it's our responsibility to be in control of our brain. And you give us the tools on how to do that in a very systematic way. One thing I wanted to address is something you brought up in a past interview, and it was a really big like aha moment for me and for many listeners. You talked about your story and how you have a memory that made you love chocolate or had you, associate chocolate with love and then you spent years and years trying to heal it. But when you figured out and years in therapy, but when you figured out your system for just being in charge of, like you said, the alpha wolf, just being commanding the urges in you and being able to override it and logically have rules set up so that in your mind you control it. um you notice that it doesn't it didn't matter whether you'd healed the past or not, because you could stop binging without actually having to do the work, although doing the work is very rewarding and we should all invest our own personal growth. And what I got was that in the brain, the root cause, like let's say it's, some event that you associate love with chocolate when you're 5 or whatever. That root cause is still in there with all the work to be done on it. But then you start a habit of eating chocolate, let's say overeating or binge eating. That habit, although may have originally come from this root cause when you're 5, actually separates from it in your mind and they become two separate things. So if you heal the root cause, you heal that thing that happened when you're 5, you still have the ingrained habit. You still have the
Yeah.
and so they're two separate things. And so for so many people, we're told that if only you heal the root cause, then you would stop doing these behaviors. But it's not the case. The hardwired behaviors that we need to override and reprogram ourselves become separate things from their root cause. And we should work on both. But let's first work on gaining control of the system and then doing, hours or years of therapy to heal.
It's kind of like if there's a raging fire in your house, the first thing you do is not to say, well, who set the fire? How did this fire start? Um, you don't want to spend a year figuring out how the fire started. You don't want to be a detective at that point. You want to be a fireman. You want to put out the fire. And then if you want to go look to figure out what caused the fire, that's okay. But the fire has a life of its own once it's burning, and you need to put out or contain the fire. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
What I wanted to say, which really struck me, was the idea that there's some, evil CEO who's coming down and saying, yes, I will take the blood and tears of all of these people that I'm addicting, so I can laugh all the way to the bank. And how it's not really like that. Uh, it's a byproduct of the capitalist economic system. And Winston Churchill once said that capitalism was the worst form of government except for all the others. And I don't know of a better form of government than capitalism, but I do know that it puts the onus on the consumer to be aware of what the motivations of the people on the other side of the transaction are. And of course, scientists who are getting rewarded for geeking out on how to maximally excite the centers of the brain are going to focus their life energy on doing that. And they're thinking of themselves as good people, and they're saying this is just really fun, and anything in moderation is okay, kind of ignoring the fact that they're making it difficult for anyone to moderate. And what you also need to know is that the, the market as a whole, consumers in particular, they they like good news about their bad habits. So they're asking to be lied to. People, they want
Mm.
an excuse to have as many calories in the smallest space as possible for the least amount of money possible, and they want to be told that it's healthy. I mean, that's why you could find some potato chip that's made with avocado oil, and people think that that's healthy for you, and they ignore the fact that every study that's ever done on unheated fats says that it's carcinogenic, and that the acrylamides that are formed by frying the chip are also carcinogenic, and that the particular kind of oil, once it's fried, might clog your arteries anyway. They want to be saying, well, now with avocado oil, they want to say, well, avocados are healthy. I could use some avocado oil. And it's very easy to get that by consumers because consumers want to be lied to. And so where this leaves us is with the necessity of doing some serious thought for ourselves and investigation into what's healthy, what's not, and then where's your personal line. Everybody draws a line between live fast and die young, the Hells Angels philosophy, or I think James Dean said, live fast, die young, and leave a good looking corpse. Um, and live slow and enjoy the ride. And most people will say, well, I don't want to be an angel, and if I die 5 years earlier, or if I suffer a little at the end of my life because of the choices I make in my 20s, then I want to enjoy my 20s more. And I think that's okay. Everybody's got the right to make that choice, but you need to think through what trade-offs are you making, and what role do you want these foods to play in your life. So I'm not saying we should never have chocolate. There are a lot of people who can have chocolate on the weekends. My sister can take 2 little squares out of her purse and say, I'm going to fold the rest up for later. And she puts it all back in her purse. And I don't understand how she does it, but she does that. And God bless her. She likes that trade off. It works for her. And certain chocolates are better than other chocolates. There's dark chocolate, and there's chocolate with dairy, chocolate without dairy. I mean, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not going to make those arguments. But what I'm saying is that you can't rely on industry and government to protect you from the profit motive that is in industry and government. You really need to think through what role you want these foods to play for yourself. You need to investigate to figure out what the truth really is, because the more you investigate, the more surprised you're going to be at what's actually healthy versus what you're being told is healthy. That's why I love the brand of your show, by the way, Learn True Health. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we're just in this situation which was a perfect storm, and part of it is because we've really embraced freedom, and you really can't have a free country without the capitalist system, and you can't have it be overly controlled. And so a byproduct of a capitalist industry is things that are not necessarily good for the populace, they're desired for the populace. Industry will make whatever's most desirable, not whatever's healthiest.
Right.
So it's up to you as a consumer to decide where that healthy line is for yourself.
We must vote with our fork. There was once a time when there was some weird hormone. It's there's 4 letters like HR something BC or whatever. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's on all the dairy products. It says no such and such a hormone. And I don't buy dairy products. I've been dairy free for a long time. So I mean, if I did buy dairy products, I probably know this name. But it used to be this hormone used to be in all the dairy because they would put it in all the cows and they would basically hop the cows up. Now they do give cows other things that are in your milk that are very, very scary. Um, but this one particular hormone was shown to cause negative health results to humans. It was passed on through the milk, and then these whoever was drinking it or eating the dairy products was getting that hormone. And it was making it so they could make more milk. So the industry wanted to keep this hormone in, but the consumers didn't. Now, how do you think us as individual consumers changed the entire dairy industry? We voted with our fork. And the
Yeah.
largest voice in that will surprise you, Walmart. Walmart noticed that their consumers were not buying the dairy products with, or were buying significantly less sales were going on with the dairy that had the hormone in it. And so Walmart was one of the companies that lobbied to only provide the hormone free, this specific hormone free dairy. And as a result, as because we voted with our fork, the companies took notice and they followed the
Yes.
trend. So we have
Yes.
to, as individuals, and also we have to spread this information, but we as individuals need to vote with our fork because it does matter, because these companies will follow suit. So just to recap, when we have cravings, we can take food. Maybe we don't necessarily like kale. I use kale as an example because some people really hate it, right? But we can take a healthy vegetable and feed it to ourselves, even though we don't like it. We're adults. We can suck it up for the 3 minutes we're tasting the flavor. We can just do it.
It can be 3 seconds in the case of blender full of romaine lettuce and a little water. You could get a half a pound of romaine lettuce into you in 3 seconds if you blend it up and drink it down.
So for the seconds that we're tasting it, what we're really doing is retraining our neurology to start enjoying to get that the nutrients are actually coming from over here, and then you'll start to enjoy it more. I had this experience with kale. Never really liked kale. And then my friend started making it, and so I started trying it because I mean it was in the last few years it's been the superfood, right? And then I started noticing that when I saw kale in the grocery store, I'd have a Pavlovian response. I'd actually start salivating. And then I would think about kale. Ooh, I'm going to make a kale boat for lunch. And then I start salivating. I noticed that my body was actually getting excited at the thought of having kale. I make this great kale boat where I take dino kale, which can be like a taco, and then I do some kind of stir fry, sometimes with maybe a handful of cashews and some beets and some celery and some cabbage and mushrooms and with some seasoning, like taco seasoning or whatever, and just maybe some onions, and just stir fry it up. And then you put it in the kale like it's a taco. And then you eat it. It's very crunchy and it has lots of beautiful
I'll be right over.
flavors.
I'll be right over.
It's so good.
I'm on
And
my way.
right, and then I just started eating kale raw, and I remember not liking it, like just detesting the taste of kale, and now I actually love the taste of kale. So I've witnessed this, and I think I'm picky with a lot of things. And I've just noticed that my palate has really changed because I forced myself to just eat it, and because I thought, okay, this is superfood, it's healthy, I got to get it in me. But then my palate changed. So, and I also cut out the foods that contained the chemical salt, sugar, oil, because I knew about how much they were hijacking my brain and they weren't good anyway. But I just noticed that over time, my palate changed and my cravings changed and my neurology changed. So I really had that experience that you're describing, which is really exciting. Now,
Has doing your podcast changed your life? It sounds like doing your podcast
yeah,
does.
I think I'd share a lot in the show about my experience of how it has changed, how I've evolved. I mean, I've always been
Yeah,
on a road of personal growth. My whole life I've been really excited about personal growth, and I healed before the podcast. I healed type 2 diabetes, chronic adrenal fatigue, chronic infections, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and infertility. And I did that
dude.
with natural medicine. That's why I started the
Wow.
podcast, because I healed so many things. We have a healthy 5-year-old, and I was told by an endocrinologist I would never have kids. I was completely infertile. And we conceived naturally with only natural medicine, with food and supplements. Supplements being like herbs and vitamins and minerals, not specific for conceiving, but just to create health and to be able to basically go against all these MDs that said I would always be diabetic, I would always have polycystic ovarian syndrome, I would always be infertile. That's what they said. And if I had believed them and listened to them, I would not have our child. I would not be happy. I don't even know if I'd still be alive. And so using food as medicine and supplements to fill in the gaps when needed, that changed my life so much that I wanted to start the podcast to help others. But I knew that it wasn't just physical, it had to be emotional and mental, because I recognized that I had overeating and binge eating, and that there was emotional stuff around that, and there was, there's other factors. We're not separated. Our emotional and mental body affect our physical body and vice versa. So we have to just get that true health is about all aspects of our life, and wanting to improve them, and seeking the information to improve them, and being willing to try new things. And so every time I interview someone, it's like I'm trying new things and
I love it.
implementing them in my life. Yeah, and your work has been monumental. You really, really helped me. I've actually, listeners can check out your podcast, because I was on your show and you did your system, a taste test of your system.
I coached you for a session. Yeah.
Yeah, you coached me for a
Yeah.
session, and it was you helped me break through something that I felt I had no control over. And in one session, it's like it was very cool. So listeners can hear that. Give a plug. What's the name of your podcast?
Well, you could find it at just go to neverbingeagain.com and click on the blog, and all the podcast episodes are there. But if you go to truehealtheating.com and you sign up for the book, you'll get copies of full-length coaching sessions that I did, where you can not only hear me, Coach Ashley, but other people too. It's all free. That's all for there.
Oh, cool. So truehealtheating.com, and then you sign up for the free book, and then in addition to the free book, you're getting recordings of these coaching sessions.
You get recordings of the coaching sessions. You get free food plan starter templates for every type of dietary philosophy: low carb, high carb, vegan, point counting, calorie counting. We'll show you sample rules that people use for different dietary philosophies. So yeah, truehealtheating.com, and sign up for that's the best thing you can do. Click on the big red button, sign up for the reader bonuses, and you'll get a free copy of the book, and you'll get the coaching sessions, and you'll get the all the other goodies.
Nice. Now, when we had you on the show last, episode 231, so it's been a while. I can't believe it. It's been just under 200 episodes ago. That doesn't even sound right. Well, so I'm friends with Glenn on Facebook since I had him on the show the first time. And so I guess I just felt like I had interviewed you in the more recently, since I kind of feel like we talk every day through Facebook. By the way, Glenn is a really fun person to follow on Facebook. He's got probably the best Facebook posts I have out of every single person I've
Oh,
ever
stop.
followed. I'm serious. I'm serious. Your posts are so fun, and sometimes very insightful, and sometimes very silly, but they're always really beautiful. And so I appreciate that when, well,
Thank you.
everyone is complaining and griping and there's so much drama in the world, you bring such a lightness to it that's also sometimes very contemplative, and it's light. So I definitely encourage people to follow Glenn Livingston on Facebook as well. So since we had you on the show many moons ago, back when you had just published your second book, you have done a lot since then. Update us. What's been going on in the world of Glenn Livingston since then?
Well, so the first book contains everything you need to stop overeating. It really does. And like I said, you can get a free copy of it, on the site where we told you. What I found, though, after I published the book, there was a great desire for coaching. And so at first I started doing the coaching, and then I developed a program, and then I had coaches that were coaching underneath me or with me is more accurate, who I train and supervise. And we heard all these very specialty stories, like I managed to never binge again with everything except for nighttime eating. I can do really well until 10 o'clock at night and then I blow it. Or I'm really good except when I have my period. Or I have the hardest time when I'm traveling. I have the hardest time when I'm super, super tired. And we recognized that there was a need for a book about very specific situational triggers. So we wrote a book called 45 Binge Trigger Busters. And that's probably the most popular alternate book that we've written so far. But then we wrote a book on nighttime eating. I say we, I have a business partner, and I'm the primary author for most of the books, but he really does help me tremendously. His name is Yoav Ezer, and he's the CEO of my company. I'm old enough and mature enough to know that I don't make a good CEO. I'm more of a med scientist and psychologist and a marketer. So we wrote a book about nighttime overeating, which has some very specific protocols associated with it that seem to help. And we wrote a workbook for people who either couldn't afford the coaching program or were more do-it-yourself kind of people. And that actually has turned out to be, we just launched it about a month ago. It's been extremely popular. I had no idea how much of a demand there was for a workbook in the market, but we thought through a lot of the exercises we were doing with coaching clients. We put it in there. What other books did I write? I wrote my autobiography as it pertains to food called Me, My Pig, and I. So for people.
Oh
I'm
my
glad you
gosh,
like it.
that's so cute. That's so
Yeah,
cute. Did you come up with that one yourself?
I came up with that myself. Yeah.
Oh, did you come
You
up with
know,
the title before you wrote the book, or like when did you have like an aha moment? I want to know, like, how did you come up with that one?
Jim Carrey has a movie called Me, Myself, and I, and it happened to be on Netflix or something as I was writing the book. And I said, well, that's it. It's Me, My Pig, and I.
I love it. I think isn't it like
Um,
me, myself, and Irene or something? Is the
oh,
name
is
of
that what it
the
is?
something like that? Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Yeah.
I remember I saw it ages ago. Oh, but that's so cute. So some
What,
listeners
what,
haven't heard that you, if they haven't heard the past episodes, you tell us a bit about the pig for those who haven't heard about it.
oh, so, I mean, I went through the whole story in this episode about the difference between loving yourself thin and being an alpha wolf that takes charge. And so the way that I took charge was I decided to call my reptilian brain my inner pig. This was before I was a vegan or knew anything about the treatment of pigs in the world or anything like that. And it was not something I was going to publish. It was going to be a private journal, just my way to overcome my own food problem. And I named it my inner pig. And I would make a rule that says I'll never have chocolate Monday to Friday. And then if I heard a little voice in my head that said, come on, Glenn, you worked out hard enough, even though it's a Wednesday, you're not going to gain any weight. You might as well. I would say, that's not me. That's my pig. I don't want chocolate. Chocolate is pig slop during the week. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. Stop squealing. Go back to your cage. And that's how I got better. Like all the years of sophisticated psychology and for the people who don't know, I was also a corporate consultant. I was doing these $1 million projects. I was, publishing all these papers. I was on TV and radio, and I had all these sophisticated things to say. And I think I'm a compassionate person. I'm joking around a little with you today, but I usually come off as more compassionate. But the way that I recover was to say, I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And it would wake me up at the moment of impulse, and it would give me those extra microseconds to remember who I was and why I wanted to make that rule in the first place. And it wasn't a miracle. Sometimes I make the wrong decision anyway, but it eradicated the sense of hopelessness and powerlessness. It eradicated the sense of you failed 1,000 times before, so you're going to fail forever. And I started to feel
Mm.
like I had the ability to make choices. And I made choices and I got better. And if you look at my top weight versus about where I am now, it's about 80 pounds different. Um, and my triglycerides went way down, and my psoriasis and rosacea went away. And I developed the ability to stick to the plan that I would make for myself. I wouldn't take anybody else's diet or rules. I don't recommend anybody take my diet or rules. I guide people in the principle to autonomously decide on what they want to eat and how to stick to it. That's
Right.
where the pig That's where the pig comes from. Yeah, and you don't have to call it a pig. I kind of wish that I didn't in retrospect.
No, I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I get some people could get confused because they have a different perception of pig. Of course, you're using the Western stereotype of the pig that is just binges and just can never get enough, can never be satiated. I mean, it's also used as a negative insult, but that for you was a break state that gave you that allowed you to just like stop the old pattern and long enough to take control.
But you could call it your food monster or your food demon. What you don't want to do, you don't want to think of it as a wounded inner child or a cute pet. It's not some, and it's not an alternative part of your personality. You're not trying to reintegrate this. Like most forms of psychology will say, you need to own your shadow. You need to look at these disowned parts of yourself and recognize that this is part of you and love it also. And that way you won't be so frightened of it, and it won't be able to act out on its own. That's not the solution that worked for me. The solution was to disavow these impulses, to define pig squeal as any thought, feeling, or impulse which suggests that I will ever break my rules between now and the day that I die. So by definition, a squeal is destructive. And why
Mm,
would I want to identify with those destructive urges? I cast that out of my identity. I assigned all doubt and uncertainty about my ability to stick with the plan. I got a lot of this from Jack Trimpey, by the way, who wrote a book called Rational Recovery. And I had to modify an awful lot of things to make it work for food. And I found that empowered me to develop a success identity, because all of these destructive thoughts were no longer me. They were just neurological junk, as Catherine Hansen says. And I became a different person. Like after a while, it was not just white knuckling it and sticking to rules. It was changing my identity about the kind of person that I was with, chocolate and pasta and pizza. And I didn't have to think about it after a while. Just like the first couple of months you're learning how to drive, you've got to concentrate on the rules of the road. But then after a while, you can daydream and listen to music and talk to your friends. I want to tell you a funny story about the pig.
yeah.
The one place that it's not good, that I really wish it didn't, people don't always know my name, because the idea of pig and pig slop, and I don't eat pig slop, and I don't let farm animals tell me what to do, that's so salient that they think of me as, oh, he's that doctor who has a pig inside him. And I'll be once in a while, at least I used to like to do this. If I go on a first date or something, I'll be in a bookstore, and someone will come up to me and they'll start pointing like I'm familiar to them, but they don't know my name, and they just go, pig guy, pig guy, pig guy. And
This
that's,
happened when you were on a date?
yeah.
No way. What? Tell me what happened.
I mean, she thought it was funny, and I explained it to her, but it's not really the impression you want to make on your first date.
Did you guys go out on a second date?
No, but I wouldn't have gone out with her a second time either.
Okay. Maybe it
I
was,
hope I hope she doesn't hear this, but yeah.
well, I mean, it's all for the greater good. It'll all work out in the end. I really do believe that there's some kind of serendipity that happens. The universe, sometimes it all plays out for a reason. But that's
She
really
she she was
funny.
she was not she was not an awful person or anything. We just were not a good match.
Right. Well, right.
Yeah.
That's just it's so funny that you've been known as the pig guy. I mean, Glenn Livingston's a really easy name to recall for me at least.
Dr.
But
Livingston, I presume.
yes, of course, of course.
Something you've never said, thank God.
Dr.
Because I let
Livingston?
Dr. Livingston, I presume.
Oh,
For
I presume that's who you are. Sure.
no, I'm older than you. I'm older than
Oh,
you. There's a famous story about an explorer that goes to Africa named Dr. Livingston, and when his assistant slash friend finally finds him, he says, "Dr. Livingston, I presume." And so ever since I was a kid, there are about 8 Dr.
Oh,
Livingstons in my family.
people are using that. I have a friend named Forrest, and he actually loved the Forrest Gump movie. He grew up with it, and everyone used to yell, "Run, Forrest, run!" He thought it was funny, and I'm just surprised he didn't like grow up scarred from it. Um, he just
Yeah,
thought it was great.
because by the 47th time someone else says it, you think, well, no one else ever said that to me before, ever.
Right.
So,
When you had talked about your inner pig in our past interviews, I actually got the name of my inner thing right away. It just came to me that I have an inner brat. She's an inner brat, and
I remember that. Yeah.
right, she wants what she wants when she wants it, and she's like a little, nasty 5-year-old that is hopped up on sugar, and she's just, throws tantrums. Little inner brat. And when you made that distinction, it was like the light went on, like, oh, okay, I have a little inner brat, and I need to tell her, like, no, we're not having, a second serving of pasta, or we're not, no, we're not going to go through the drive-through, and no, we're going to eat kale. You're going to enjoy a kale smoothie, and you're going to stop nagging me. And so it's been very clear to me that it's like by putting it in that context, and you said like with the pig. So it's good to like make it a little bit comical because it's part of, I think, feel like it's part of that break state and part of you getting control back. But like you said,
Yes.
it's not
Yes.
about reintegrating, it's not about loving it. It is a part of our brain that wants to kill things, eat things, and sleep with things. And the thing is, we can't, like you said, you don't pee in on the street or pee in a meeting. You have control
I
of your
don't.
body, right? Yes, good, good, good that you do. But we also don't run around, just like having sex in the street or killing people. Thank God. I'm like knocking on wood here that we all keep control of these urges. But the one
Because
urge that
that
we kind of let go is food because it's socially acceptable. But if we say like binging is like that same part of the brain that wants to just mate with everything, it's like, okay, well, I've been able to my entire life control the urge to just randomly mate with something in the street or kill someone just because they made me angry. Like I've easily been able to control that, and I can figure out how to control that urge to overeat because that's part of the same mechanism.
it's just another element of being a civilized person in society.
Right. Yeah. Tell me more about this not eating at night or like this nighttime eating because I think that's like that's the thing I've been working on because I've heard people say, guests have said on the show, like we only have a certain amount of willpower. And I think even you talked about it, like by 11 p.m., we have no more willpower left. And for me, I'll eat really healthy during the day, but if I'm staying up past a certain hour, I get hungry again, and then it's like the willpower's not there. So,
So there's an 8-part protocol that we came up with after we paid some researchers to do an exhaustive secondary research survey, look at all the research that's been done. And then we did our own research into our own population. And we did, surveys, and we talked to everybody. And we figured out that there were actually 8 things that people were doing who successfully stopped eating after a certain time at night. The first one was they knew the difference between nighttime and daytime. And that this sounds kind of silly, but there was a very clear demarcation point. And if you think about a vampire movie, the characters always know the difference between sundown and the daytime. They know when the sun sets, and there's a variety of activities that they go through. They might put garlic on the door. They might pour salt around the house. They might prepare their secret, wooden stake weapons or something like that. They might post a sentry at the door. The heroes in a vampire movie, and the music always changes when the sun is down. The mood of the movie is much different because everyone's on high alert. And so there's a very clear demarcation point, and there's a ritual that people go through in order to punctuate that demarcation point. And so we found that the people who were successful, they adopted some type of a ritual, and it wasn't necessarily at the same time every day. It could be as soon as dinner was done. Um, or some people say I'll stop eating at 8 o'clock every night unless dinner doesn't start before 7, and then they're allowed to go a half hour later or something. But there's a ritual. Um, One of our customers, Liv, I have permission to say all this. She claps her hands and she goes, dinner and done. As soon as the dishes are away, she goes, dinner and done. And saying that out loud ritualistically moves her from her lower brain to her upper brain, and she knows that now she's got to protect herself from, we call it pigula. Pigula whispers at night. The pigs, the pig squeals during the day, and pigula whispers at night. Pigula is more seductive. And then once you've done that ritual, another ritual could be clapping your hands 3 times as if you're dusting them off and saying kitchen's closed. Other people have more physical rituals where they'll change clothes or take a shower or go through a moisturizing routine or do something to their body which feels like it's in a physically different state. So they know that they've entered the decompression time of the nighttime before bed when you start to let go of the day and wind down to go to sleep. So those were the most obvious things that people were doing. But then we found that the people who were overeating at night, who stopped overeating at night, most of them had not been breakfast eaters beforehand. Most of them didn't like to eat until they were 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And they would say that they just don't like breakfast. And part of the reason they don't like breakfast is because they're eating late at night and they're too full in the morning. And they discovered that they had to move their first meal to earlier in the day, and it needed to be more substantial. They couldn't let their pigula be saving calories for late at night. They needed to keep their blood sugar up in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And that was something that when we work with people, they have to force themselves to do. It's not something that comes naturally to them, and most of them don't want to. Matter of fact, a lot of people try to shut me up when I tell them that. And a lot of people are very involved with intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell them that I don't dispute the medical benefits of intermittent fasting. I don't dispute, I think that it's very valuable in many ways, but I prefer that if someone's involved with binge eating, that they don't do that for 6 to 12 months after they're recovered from the binge eating. The reason is I think there's an evolutionary mechanism in the brain that says if calories and nutrition are not available for a period of time, when they are available, we need to hoard them. I think that's the essence of the feast and famine environment that we evolved in. And I think that overcoming binge eating involves signaling the body and the brain in particular that there's a regular, reliable course of nutrition and calories flowing through at all times. And I think that that's part of why we're finding that people that overcome nighttime overeating are eating more in the morning. They also have a more satisfying lunch. We came up with a saying that says, add some crunch to your lunch. So can you put some celery or carrots or peppers or something that makes you feel like you're actually chewing and crunching and getting some of that oral aggression out while you're eating? I mean, I'm actually not joking. It feels like it is funny, but it feels like a meal. It feels more like a meal.
Right.
And if you're having a good solid breakfast and you're having some crunch with your lunch, by the time you get to dinner, you're not quite as overwhelmed. The other thing has to do with self-care. And it goes along with the fact that there are only so many good decisions we can make during the course of the day. And see, it turns out that your decision-making tank about food is also impacted by your decision-making tank about non-food items.
How so? That's very interesting.
Well, if I make you do math problems before I offer you a marshmallow, you're more likely to have the marshmallow than if I didn't make you do those math problems. Because I engage you in thinking and decision-making about the right answer. If you're spending an awful lot of time doing email during the day, every email is a decision. Is this spam? Do I delete it? Do I delegate it? Is it critical? Do I have to respond now? Can I defer it? There's a lot of brain glucose that gets burned up while you're figuring out what to do with each email. And so if you're living in an environment where you're constantly impinged upon for decision making, then taking, and those kind of decisions could involve, you know, mommy, who's taking me to soccer practice? Mommy, are we going to have, pizza or hamburgers for dinner tonight? Um, if you're constantly impinged upon to make decisions all day long, taking 2 10-minute breaks during the day, or even 2 5-minute breaks during the day, where you put down your phone and you turn off your computer and you walk away from people and you just breathe or walk outside for a moment and get away from all the input. Get away from all the input, get away, don't make any decisions at all for 10 minutes twice a day. You can restore that decision-making capability to a certain extent. It would be better if you could go for a jog. It would be better if you could take a nap. It would be better if you could do something a little longer. But those 2 10-minute breaks a day can make a difference, and you'll find that when you get home at night, it's easier. The other thing that people do is, since our decision-making capability is worse at the end of the day than the beginning of the day, decide what's for dinner and prepare it before you leave in the morning. Put it in Tupperware, have it sitting in your refrigerator so that when you get home, you can just put it in the microwave and go to town and not have to make any more decisions. So you're eliminating a lot of that willpower draining energy at night that you're not good at.
And
So
delete the word microwave, replace with stove, because I don't promote microwaves, but I get
I mean,
the gist of
I don't
your.
even I don't even use the stove. I don't even use the stove. They've I mean, I'm a raw vegan for
Yeah,
people that don't know.
I
I don't
right.
force this on people. Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally, totally. I was just teasing because you're like, put it in Tupperware. I'm like, not plastic. Put it in a microwave. No microwave.
I try to speak in the language of the masses because
Right.
I don't want to put up too many barriers for people. I want them to stop binging first and foremost, because if you stop having 20,000 calories a day and you microwave a bowl of brown rice and peas, I think you're a lot better off. But
Yes.
you know, but I agree with you, Ashley. I mean, look, my ideal is that I eat fruit and leafy green vegetables, and I actually have a dehydrator on top of my stove because I don't use the stove. Um, so I don't understand why people think that the byproducts of fire are good for us in any way, shape, or form. I mean, didn't we learn our lessons with cigarettes? It's a whole different story, right? So no microwaves, no stoves. If you want to come live with me for a month, you're going to be shocked.
Oh my
But I don't.
gosh. I think I'd love it.
Yeah.
If you do all the food prep, I think I'd love it. I was raw vegan for 6 days, and it was great. I did it during the summer, easy to find all the fresh produce. But I got bored with eating the same food over and over again. I got bored, and that's so day 7. I'm like, oh man, if I have to eat another zucchini noodle bowl with marinara, which was so delicious. I think I just figured out how to make one good dish, and it was delicious. And my husband was like, I could eat this way the rest of my life, but I I don't know if I'm cut out to do raw vegan, but I definitely eat raw sometimes, and um I would.
I don't push that at all.
No,
I
no,
work
you
with people on
don't.
all
You
sorts of
don't.
diets. Yeah.
You don't. But it's interesting that some people find liberation in restriction. I was friends in back when I lived in Toronto. I was friends with a woman. I could see her face. I think her name was Jen, but a beautiful, wonderful woman. I was a teenager and she was in her 20s, and we were taking an advanced leadership program through Landmark Education, where we had to meet once a month on the weekends, and we met weekly on Tuesday nights. And Saturday is, for those of the Jewish faith, is the day of rest, where you're not supposed to do anything, but you're not supposed to carry anything but the Bible. You're not supposed to, drive a car, turn on a light switch. And she was transitioning to Orthodox. She was gonna marry an Orthodox Jewish man, and she was transitioning to Orthodox. And she said, I want to attend on Saturday, but I have to walk if I want to go. And she lived on the other side of Toronto, the other side. And I volunteered to walk with her. And so I got to her house before the sun rose, and we walked clear across all of Toronto and got there in time for in time for our course. And the whole time we talked about this because I was really fascinated. She was a dancer, she had long hair, like she was very free. And why was she going to choose to be in a relationship with a man where she had to shave her head, make a wig out of her own hair, never allow anyone to see her hair again, never dance with people other than women, never show any skin, beyond the wrist or something. Like it just the restriction after restriction. And why was she happy and excited? But beyond the fact that she was in love with this man, why was she was actually excited to become an Orthodox Jew. And she explained to me in our very long walk that in the amount of restriction when she was raised in a setting where she had no restrictions and she was loose and you know could do whatever, and she found that she just ended up not really liking herself, but with these restrictions in her faith, it actually gave her more room to be who she was, and she actually found more comfort in the rules that she decided to take on. And that twisted my mind because I always thought that freedom and no restrictions was the ultimate way to live. But people in certain circumstances find that restrictions force them to become more creative and more self expressed and feel more comfortable and at ease. And your example is your system, you create rules around your food, and that ends up giving you more freedom. Even though, so it's like restriction can equal freedom, in a
Yeah,
sense. It's really neat.
I, I mean, I don't think of it as restriction necessarily, but you could. I've got a lot to say about what you said. Can I talk for a moment or two?
Absolutely, please do.
So, first of all, um, I believe that freedom sits on top of discipline. It's not opposed to it.
Mm.
I, it's only because of the discipline of the engineers who put together my car that when I turn the wheel 30 degrees to the right and I press on the gas pedal, that it goes in that direction and I can open up my radius of locomotion and travel all over the city. It's only because of the discipline of the city planners who put stoplights in the most dangerous intersections and yield signs in the ones that weren't so dangerous. And they organized it and really looked at the whole city and the way that was laid out that I can freely move about. And it's only because of my discipline and having learned the rules of the road and abiding by them that I can go about the day and do all that. So anybody who's more than 16 years old knows the tremendous freedom that comes once you learn how to drive, but there's a discipline you have to develop first. It's only because I'm a jazz musician, and it's only because I studied the scales exhaustively and I know the structure of music that I can improvise outside of them and express my soul. And so Jim Rohn said, a life of discipline is much better than a life of regret. And what I think is that either you're going to be free or your pig is going to be free. Either you're
Mm.
going to, right? Either you're going to be the master or the pig is going to be the master. And I want to be the master of my own fate. And in order to do that, I've got to accept the adult responsibility of controlling my impulses with discipline. I think it's a fact of life, and I think that people are confused about freedom versus discipline, and they think that they're giving something up. Like, my pig could say, "You can't give up chocolate. That's way too boring. You you can't live without that stimulation and pleasure." But by giving up chocolate, I have largely lived free of any major health concern. I am 80 pounds thinner than I used to be. I can walk in the world as a thin, confident, healthy, handsome man and be a leader in my field. I can hike a mountain a lot quicker, which means I get to spend more time on top enjoying the sunset or the fresh air or the view or feeling. Anybody that's hiked the tall mountain knows the feeling of owning the mountain when you get to the top.
Mm.
It's only because of all those disciplines that I can do that. And if I continue to eat chocolate, then I would be depriving myself of all of those things. So it's never really that we are depriving ourselves of pleasure. It's a question of which pleasure are we depriving ourselves of, and have we made a fully informed choice? Usually the pig will, right? Well, because the pig will concentrate you on, it will focus you on the short-term pleasure that you're giving up. But
Yes.
that's not all there is. There's long-term pleasure too.
Instant gratification.
Right. And maturity involves recognizing that sometimes we sacrifice short-term pleasures to pursue longer-term pleasures. Sometimes we give up the roller coaster of highs and lows for more of a contented life. It's the difference between going to an amusement park and having these adrenaline rushes, and then having to wait in long lines between them, versus floating down the river in a kayak and enjoying the fresh air and watching the breeze, float the willows back and forth. And as we get older and we mature, we usually opt for more of the contented, sustainable pleasures in life rather than the fleeting pleasures that burn us out quickly. So we move more from the live fast and die young end of the continuum to the, live slow and enjoy the ride, which is necessary when you get older because there are fewer years left, right? So you want to make them last as long as you can. The last thing I want to say, Ashley, about that is that your pig will tell you that boredom is intolerable. And we live in a world of excessive stimulation. Go count the number of scene changes on any television show or movie. How many bombs and naked women or scantily clad women or car chases or fireworks are you seeing when you're looking at a coming attraction? We're led to believe that we need this constant input and constant overstimulation of our senses. And the natural experience when you let go of that is the experience of boredom. When you experience life the way that it is meant to be, it seems boring because you don't have all that stimulation. There's just you and there's nature and there's other people, right? And it takes a while for your nervous system to adjust to that because there's a phenomena called downregulation, which means if you overstimulate the nervous system in some way, you will stop responding. If you live underneath the subway, after a couple of weeks, you don't hear the trains going by anymore. You sleep like a baby because your nervous system has been overstimulated and it doesn't respond to that noise anymore. If you have a chocolate bar every day, you stop enjoying the taste of it as much as you did when you first started. You don't get the same level of pleasure.
Yep.
And you certainly don't get this pleasure from an apple like you used to. Thankfully, that process reverses itself in a phenomenon called upregulation. So if you stop having sugar, for example, then within 6 to 8 weeks, your taste buds double in sensitivity and your neurological system starts to produce the dopamine that it used to in response to, apples and produce and that kind of stuff. And so the upshot of this is that the experience of becoming unaddicted from food is always the experience of going through boredom. And on the other side of that are two things. First of all, there's the enjoyment of the way that life actually is. There's a calming of the nervous system. There's a satisfaction and a contentment that comes and peace that comes into your being. We started this whole conversation by saying this woman found peace at dinner when she never had that before. That's on the other side of boredom, not that far away. Maybe 6 to 8 weeks, you start to feel that. But on the other side of that is your life purpose. See, when you're not distracted by the overstimulation, then your libido, your life's energy, can start to go into what's really important to you. And you'll start to want to take on some other project. Maybe that just means spending more time rolling around on the floor with your kids. Maybe it means tidying up the house. Maybe it means applying for a promotion. Maybe it means volunteering. I don't know. But for one way or another, you're going to find yourself inspired to channel the pleasure-seeking energy that you used to channel into excessive taste stimulation. You're going to channel it into things that feel very worthwhile to you. And when you do that, pig slop looks pathetic. It's much less interesting in contrast. And so your pig doesn't want you to get there. So it says, this is way too boring. Now, the truth is, I don't mean to push you to be a raw vegan, and I don't have any need for you to do that. But the people that do it successfully, they spend a lot of time researching at first different ways to stimulate the senses with raw vegan things. There are all types of recipes. You can make raw vegan pizza. You can make, raw vegan mac and cheese. There's all kinds of things that you can do, and they're pretty darn good if you put the time and energy and you get the equipment to do it. But over time, even that starts to seem too stimulating, and you gravitate towards what most people would think are very boring meals. More days than not, I have bananas and romaine lettuce for breakfast and lunch. More days than not. And then I'll make myself some kind of special salad at dinner. And I'm not bored at all with it. I really look forward to it. And I don't really want the excessive stimulation because then I spend more time thinking about food. And over the years, I've gotten so much more excited about all these other things that it doesn't seem natural to me to find all my pleasure from food anymore. And I feel like I spent 30 years looking for all my pleasure in food. I want to spend the balance of my life making a difference and putting my energy someplace else. So, which is not to say I don't get pleasure from food anymore. I do, but it's not the same. I don't have the same proportion of my libido dedicated to food pleasure as I used to. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And everything you said, I was thinking about we're all going through COVID-19 right now. This is what's happening now. Although people listen to these episodes even years after we record them because they're still relevant information. But at the moment, everyone is the whole world. I was just listening to Al Jazeera. I find listening to foreign news even more interesting than our news because you get like just a little bit of a different spin sometimes. Or
Sure.
there's RT. There's other. I like listening to many different news outlets and just seeing the different opinions. But there are countries that are shutting down. In Africa, there's several countries shutting down, cities completely shut down. There were some cities that made it illegal to travel. So it's just the crackdown is happening more and more. And I've lived just outside of Seattle with my family. So we've been in quarantine and only leave the house for, well, we get out in nature, go for walks. But even now, the governor of Washington is starting to say, he was saying like a week ago, you can still go for a bike ride, you can still go for a walk. And a few days ago, he said, don't leave your house no matter what, even if it's just for essentials. So now he's saying, don't even go outside to walk your dog. Like it's just getting to the point where
Yeah.
people are stir crazy. Luckily, we live in a house, but if I was living back in our old apartment, man, I would be going nuts. I had no room in that apartment. So I'm just, I'm feeling for the people who don't have a yard to walk in. At least I can go in the backyard and garden. I can get in the sun. Our kid can run around.
Can you
But
imagine what prisoners feel like?
yeah, exactly. Or what animals, animals that we put in the zoos, or thinking about
Yeah.
people who are always people or animals who are always held captive. So we are all going through that, and we're all affected by COVID-19 in one way or another. But I've noticed in the last week my eating habits shifted, and because I'm home more. But I found myself like eating because I'm bored, eating because like we're just, I'm not doing anything, right? Other, because we are always out and doing stuff.
You're seeking the input.
And then I just noticed I was like, walking around the house because I had to move around, and I always end up in, the kitchen is kind of in the center of the house. And I'm like, oh, what's in the fridge? Look in the fridge for the 50th time today. Oh, look in all the drawers. Oh, yeah, okay, all the avocados are still there. What should I make for dinner? What should I make now? It's 4 p.m., too early for dinner. What can I eat now? And it was just like food becomes an event because there's nothing else to do. And I watched this happen because I like becoming the observer and watching the behavior and then going, isn't this interesting? This doesn't need to control me, but I can observe it. And then that's when it hit me. Oh, good. We're interviewing Glenn in a few days. We get to talk about this because I bet a lot of people have noticed binging, or that justification, like that little voice that wants to mate and eat and kill, is getting a lot more a lot more attention now because we're stuck at home. And
Our business is actually up a little bit.
I thought
I,
so.
I I feel guilty about it because everybody is suffering. I mean,
Mm.
I'm working super hard, and I'm working to help people, and I don't take much money out of the business. 'Cause but
Glenn,
our
Glenn,
business, what
you have such a kind heart. Like who else would feel guilty for, I mean, you're helping people. Just
I know.
think of the woman, the listener who said that, through tears in her eyes, that I have peace now. For the first time ever, I ate dinner without anxiety and I have peace. So, the money that you and your company make are a reflection of how many people you're helping. You're touching lives. Your book, although you give it for free, your book is #1 bestseller on Amazon. There's tons of fantastic reviews. So thousands and thousands of people have been helped through your program.
We just crossed 4,000 reviews today.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
So that was the neurotic Jewish person in me that was guilty feeling guilty about making money. So
But no, it's so human to because I've been looking around at these companies that are blatantly making a profit off of people suffering and the COVID-19 crisis. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, but I'm in a marketing Facebook group, and someone said, okay, who is the COVIDpreneurs out there? What are you doing to, like, turn a fast buck in this, because of this situation? And I got angry, and I said to myself, I would not, I don't want to make money off of anyone because of this, and that's like a smart
well, but
entrepreneurs.
the truth is, it's actually more unethical for me not to make money because I have to support a bunch of people in the company, and we have to keep expanding the
Right.
advertising, and the banker doesn't tell me at the end of the month, gee, Glenn, you're a really good person. You're helping all these people. You don't have to pay your mortgage. I wish they, I wish they would.
Right. But in your
Actually,
situation, your money means you're helping people. There's a direct
yeah,
correlation, and
yeah.
right now people are stuck at home and they're suffering and they're seeking an answer.
It's a good time to get coached. It's a good time to buy some of these books and look into it.
Glenn, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show again, as always. You can come back anytime. Every time you publish 6 books, just come back on.
I think I'm out for a while. I had those 6 books in me because we'd done thousands of coaching sessions, and I knew what all the issues were, and we developed the answers. And I not only do this myself, but I work in concert with these 4 other coaches, plus my business partner
Mm.
Yoav. They're always coming up with insights. We're always looking at situations, and so I had all these answers in me for all these specialty situations, and it was more like my Never Binge Again was a book that really took me 8 years to write because I did 8 years of journaling before I turned it into a book. And if you looked at it, it was only a month in the actual writing, but it was 8 years in development. So it's kind
Hmm.
of the same thing for these 6 books. There were about 4 years and thousands of sessions in development. And I think that I'm out. I think I have to see another few thousand people before I come up with more.
Very cool. Well, you're welcome back on the show anytime. And if a listener wants to work with you or wants to join your coaching program and become a coach, should they just go to truehealtheating.com and get the information there?
Everything starts at truehealtheating.com. Sign up for the reader bonuses, and you'll be led to the podcast. You'll be led to the coaching program. You'll be led to the Facebook forum. You'll be led to the free copies of the book in Kindle Linkerpedia format. If you want the physical copies, you can get them. There is a charge for those. Um, yeah, truehealtheating.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn Livingston. I presume it's been a pleasure. Stay
Okay.
safe, stay healthy, everyone, and thank you so much for your beautiful episode. I just know this is going to help a lot of people.
Thank you, dear. It went by quickly. Thanks.